So good day and welcome back. So today we get to talk and go over a very interesting plant family or a very interesting group of plants. And right now we are showing you a photograph of several members of this family that without a flower, they might not be as attractive or they might not be even noticed by people until they have a flower. And obviously, that's going to be the case with many plants. But we'll return to this photograph later on so that you can see this very nice plants with lots and lots of flowers. So we get to talk about the Proteaceae or the Protea or macadamia nut family because macadamia nuts will be a plant that will fall under this family. And we have a family that's a dicot, so broadleaf, 80 genera. We're not going to see all of them, just the more important one, and about 1,600 plus species. What is very interesting about this family group is that it's going to primarily be native to South America with a few individuals that remain behind when the continents split up. But definitely South Africa or Africa, when it's separated from South America, whatever ancestor of the modern day members of this family stay there, found some very nice niches, areas where it can thrive, and it was able to diversify. And then in Australia has also one of the largest diversity of members of this family in the Proteaceae. And that there was some ancestor when Australia separated from the landmass. An ancestor happens to remain in Australia. And as Australia went through different ecological environment, some of these plants found those niches where it was able to be diversified. And so prior to this, we've also spoken or talked about the myrtle or the Myrtaceae, the eucalyptus family. That will be the second one. So the Myrtaceae and the Proteaceae will be the two main families that you would find dominating Australia. And some of them will also go into Africa, and definitely there's going to be South America as well. But for our purpose, the majority of what you're going to see out in the garden will have its origin either in Africa or in Australia. And here is a typical family, a typical member. Yes, they're going to have very, very large flowers. And in the beginning, people only knew them as a cut flower or in a flower arrangement. And then later on, as they became available, then people started to grow them in the landscape. And here's the side view of a cluster of flowers. So here we have dozens of blossoms that are getting ready to open and getting ready to show their face to the world. This one is the King Protea, which is the state flower for South Africa, and this one is uh, Talopi, which is going to be the state flower for Western Australia or Australia. So this would be another very popular individual. And so here is some of the blossoms as they have already opened. And collectively, they are going to create that very, very nice show or display for the pollinators to be attracted to it. Here is a typical plant. This is Gravelia. This is the tree. And I'm showing you this photograph because it's going to be a very common ornamental tree here in Southern California. And it's showing you some of the classic makeup of the flower clusters and or the individual blossom. And so when we are going to be looking a little bit closer at these blossoms, we're going to find that the majority of the flower, the blossom, is going to be made up of a very long stigma with a very long style. So the stigma is going to be at the top and a very long style that will find its way to the receptacle of the blossom. And then when we look even deeper, we are going to find that the anthers or the male component of the flower are going to be partly fused to the tepal. And in this case, we are going to use the word tepal as a new vocabulary for petals and sepals that are very difficult to differentiate. There's not going to be differences between them. They're going to look the same. And so instead of calling them petals and sepals, we are just going to call them tepals or tepals. And those can be also found with orchids and a few other plant groups. Tulips would be another one. So tepals would be the makeup of the blossom, and there's going to be four of them, and the four of them are going to have that attachment or fusion of the stamen. So here is the male component of the flower, and on the top we have the stigma and the style leading to the ovary, which would be constitute the female component of the flower. And so when we take one single blossom and we break it into pieces, this is what we are going to find. The different tepals, four of them just split up with that respective anther attached to it, and that very long, and in this case, colorful stigma that will play the role of attracting the pollinator, and the ovary that will later turn into the fruit or the fruit that will produce the seeds. And the pollination is going to be very interesting. Most of them will have a very large blossom and they're going to be very colorful. And that is because in their native habitat, they may be pollinated by some kind of bird. And it's also known that in Australia, some of the pygmy possums and or some of the other marsupials have uh, have a one-to-one relationship with some of this some members of this family where the plant will provide the food, but not only the food, but also the shelter or cover from their own predators. Obviously, these are not my photograph, but their pollination biology is going to be very interesting. And so if you're interested in learning more, I'm sure you can find some videos online. And a few others that will not mind insects going by and taking the pollen and the nectar and bring about pollination. Members of this family are also have evolved to be or grow around areas where there might be some fires or routine fires that will burn the area. Sometimes the seeds are going to be held in what is known or looks like a cone, like a woody structure, and the seeds are going to be held there. They're going to be held there until a fire burns the cone that will then allow the cone-like structure to open or split and allowing the seeds to fly out and land on the ground and then germinate. And it's a very interesting strategy. So the plant knows that after a fire, there's going to be less competition for some of the seedlings because all the plants would have probably burned down to the ground. And also now that there has been a fire that has gone through, the soil is going to be richer in vitamins and minerals because of all the ash from the previous plants. And so the seedling has a very good opportunity of getting established and has a better opportunity of reaching adulthood and flowering in seeds. Keeping in mind that many of these plants also come from or grow in soils that are very poor in nutrition. And so having this boost in ash is going to be essential for the seedlings to become established. And here's some of the cones as they have just kind of opened. And I mentioned before that members of this family come from areas where the soil is very poor. And so over millions of years, the plants have evolved as something very special, and that is going to be known as a proteoid roots. And these are specialized roots that you're going to find within members of the Proteas. One of the elements that they're going to be seeking out It's going to be the phosphorus. And the phosphorus, they're going to be able to gather whatever little amount is in the soil by having this specialized root systems. And so the roots are made up so that they can sequester whatever little vitamins and minerals are going to be found in the substrate. And that is going to be enough for them to carry out their life cycle. This is very important because when somebody is going to be growing members of this family, proteas, in their garden, it is very important and crucial that you do not fertilize them. Adding Miracle Grow or adding any kind of fertilizers where some of the phosphorus is going to be very high concentration is going to be toxic to members of this family. You can get away with having organic matter that is going to release the vitamins and minerals at a slow rate, or use a diluted fertilizer that is very, very low in the phosphorus or in that middle component of the what is known as the NPK. So Proteomic Roots, adaptation to growing on very poor soil or soil that is deprived of vitamins and minerals. And so this is why some of these members are going to be the more common plant in some of the habitats in Australia and South Africa because of this adaptation. And so make sure that if you're going to use any kind of fertilizer, that you do not use fertilizers that are going to be high in the phosphorus. And so I mentioned about the flower arrangements. Here are some of the members known as pincushions that have traditionally been used as an exotic flower, as something weird, as something outstanding for in decoration. And it's also very important for you to understand that a lot of them can be grown here in California without a problem because many of them are going to come from South Africa, which has a climate very similar to California, Southern California, and or Southwestern Australia, which also has a climate very similar to California. And so we here in California are very lucky that we can grow them in the landscape without any problem. They already come from a climate where it's very dry, so that's the climate that we can also provide. And that is exactly why many of these are being grown in an area known as Temecula. Many flower growers have cleared some of the native vegetation and they are now being commercially growing many of these proteas for the flower industry. So this is similar to how they would grow. So soil very deprived or extremely deprived of any vitamins and minerals. So this is Resende's brother Protea growers in Temecula or in Temecula area. And here's some of their stems or the long stems that are now being packed and sent to the flower industry. And then we have macadamia as another member. Macadamias have their origin not in Hawaii, but in Australia. So that's where there's a lot of diversity. Earlier on, taken into Hawaii, where most of the tourists who visited Hawaii then got a chance or the opportunity to sample the nut, and then it became the iconic symbol of Hawaii. But if you are lucky enough to be in a climate or an area where you can grow macadamia nuts out there, here is in the city of Lakewood, where perhaps about 30 something years ago, some of the macadamia or some macadamia trees were planted as a street tree. And now you can walk through that street on any given day. And if you have a bag, you can collect yourself a nice bag of local grown macadamia nuts off of the ground. And as you walk throughout the city of Long Beach and also here in Southern California, you may see macadamia nuts being grown by many people as a street tree. So here's another one. And here is that flower cluster. So the flower clusters are as they beginning to open. And here are the blossoms for macadamia. It has exactly the same components as the other protea that we examined. the four tepals, the very long stigma, or the stigma with a very long style, and that ovary that eventually becomes the macadamia nut, which is what we have here, the macadamia nut that will be ready to harvest. And these are some that I picked up from Lakewood as they were falling or on the ground, pick them up, and yeah, break the shell, eat the content, and it's very good. And on the other side of the plant fruit, we have the remnants of that stigma and style, and you can see where the pollen eventually made its way into the embryo of that seed. And so that's the remnants of that. And macadamia nuts can be purchased at a very high price around here. Obviously, it's going to be a very good commodity. It's also very important for you to eat them soon after you purchase them, and that is because they have a high content of oil, and the oil becomes rancid over time. So do not stash them or store them. Eat and enjoy the macadamia nuts. And there's going to be different forms that you're going to be able to find. From Australia, we have adenanthus. These are known as woolly bush because they're very soft, keeping in mind that they are going to come from dry climate, so they are going to be adapted for surviving very, very hot areas with very little water. And so they're going to have a lot of hairs. In this case, they're going to make the plant very soft, kind of like the wool or the tail of a kitty cat. And it's going to be a very popular plant for the landscape, especially for landscapes that do not want to use a lot of water. Some of these plants may bring some kind of interesting uh, architectural features into the landscape. And so here are the leaves of that woolly bush. And once again, we have a very small blossom flower here. So not as showy as the previous ones, but they're there if you happen to look closely. And here's the open blossom. And in this case, you can see the stigma style up here. And here's just the tepals with the stamens. And there's a close-up of that flower for Adenanthus. And here's the flower that I have broken into pieces just so that you can see the different characteristics of the family. And we have Santa Cruz Botanic Garden, a garden that specializes in plants from southwestern Australia. And so if you ever have a chance to go visit this botanic garden, you should do so because it's going to be a great place, especially if you happen to time it when a lot of the members of this family are going to be blooming. And so here's a different Adenonanthus. This one comes from the coast of southwestern Australia. Here it is growing, and here's the close-up of the leaves, and already showing you some color, and even the blossoms that are going to be a little bit darker in color or more colorful. And not to mention, there are going to be some hybrids because many of those plants that you see from Australia have been introduced by UC Santa Cruz through a special project with Australia. And so here is a hybrid between woolly bush and the coastal woolly bush. So Adenanthus cunninghami that is going to be used as a large scale ground cover. So it can grow very wide from characteristics that it adopted from one parent, but it also has the feel of the other parent. So it's a combination of both. Obviously, that's what hybrids will do. And the flowers are going to be dark red. And then I mentioned UC Santa Cruz, where they have many other Adenanthus in display. So if you want to see and just get an idea of some of the plants, how they would look, and if you're not able to travel to southwestern Australia, then UC Santa Cruz would be the closest place that you can go visit them. And here's another one. The Australian common name is going to be jug flower because apparently the flowers, when they're in the bud stage, may resemble some kind of jug or container for carrying water and something like this. And then we have Hakia, which is going to be another genus in the memberless family. This one is going to have very sharp needle-like leaves. So they're going to be very spiny, and you can see the end of the leaves that ends in a very sharp point. And here are the flowers, and very typical of the family member. So here's that individual blossom. So you see the stigma with the style to the ovary, and then the four tepals with a stamen attached to it. This one is very, very fragrant. It's another very good plant if you ever get a chance to grow it. And I was very happy the very first time that I saw the flowers that we have here because I've known many people who have grown it for many, many years. And for some reason, they have never seen the flower or it has never flowered for them. So the flowers are not going to be that showy. So maybe they have missed it, or maybe if you miss them, maybe you can find the fruit. The fruit is going to be a very woody component. Most likely, it's going to require some kind of fire to open it up. And the woodiness is going to protect the seeds inside from being desiccated and be killed by the heat. And here's a different species that was available at Rogers Garden. Here's some of the buds of the flowers as they're beginning to open, and that is when it's fully open. Yes, the pink color that you see here are going to be those tepals, and the white color with the yellow is going to be the stigma and the style. So this is Hakia laurina or laurel leaf Hakia. And here's Hakia clavata, once again from UC Santa Cruz. And then the more common or the more popular is going to be Banksia. And Banksias, the genus Banksia, will have its origin in Australia. So here is some of the larger members. There's one growing in Claremont, California. And here's that very large cone-like flower cluster. Here is another one, which this one is showing us some of the brand new flowers as they're opening, some of the old ones, and even some cones that have been are waiting. So here's some of the very nice open blossoms. And so here's the blossoms or the close-up. So hundreds of tiny blossoms just kind of waiting to open and provide the pollinator with that nectar and maybe some pollen. And here's the stigmas and the style. And the more common or the one that you can grow very easily out here is going to be this coast banksia. This photograph or this trees, plants are growing in Santa Monica in a park owned by the Department of Recreation and Parks. And so when I had a chance to visit them and find them, I was very happy. I got a chance to see the flower, and here's when they were in full flower. And here's some of the cones. In this case, the cones do not require fire, so when this fruit matures, it's going to open up and release thousands upon thousands of seeds. And I've grown them from seeds. They're very, very easy. Because the cone is very woody, it is now a something that a lot of the artists who use can use for making beautiful things. And so here is a pen that was done by a coworker back in the days that took it to his guild of artists, and they were all went bonkers for it. And so he gave me this pen as a thank you for introducing them to some of these new cones. And it's a beautiful, beautiful pen, handmade. And if you ever get a chance to get one, do so because it's a beautiful work of art. So this pen came from one of the cones that you see right here. And there's the close-up where you can see where the different compartments would have been and where the seeds were produced. So here's another one. different species. This one growing on Cow polypomona. So this one is going to be more of a low shrub. So because they are the main ones in some of their habitat, you're going to find individuals that are going to grow as big as trees. Some of them are going to be shrubs, and a few of them are going to be ground cover, or just kind of creep and crawl along the ground. And so here's some of the old or the spent flowers, but it gives you an idea how they would have looked. So now these are gone. And then here's Banksia blegnifolia, which is kind of represents or looks very similar to a fern. And so this is going to be more of a ground cover. So there is a rhizome that is crawling underneath the ground or just about ground level. And as it grows, it's going to flower and it's going to produce brand new shoots. So here's some of these copper color leaves. Those are the brand new shoots that kind of look like a fern or very ferny. And so for landscaping, if you want to create a tropical landscape, but having in mind water conservation, this may be some good plants that you might want to experiment with. And so here is the different view showing you some of the flowers in the very large cone, and there's some. So because it is a creeping, crawling individual, the flowers are produced above soil level or just about there. And I was able to grow it a couple of years ago, and I was able to take some of this photograph of the blossoms as they are beginning to mature. And so you can see how colorful they can be. And so here is just another big individual growing at Capali San Luis Obispo. And here's just the cones or the old flower spikes for you to see. And there's the growth. And here's even another one. Again, very tropical looking, but not a lot of water. This one growing and meandering through some of the rocks. And you can see the brand new rhizome right here as it crawls along the ground, and some very nice silvery colorful foliage. And on the other side, you can see some of the blossoms or the cones, and it's even now kind of crawling out of its space and onto the walkway. And here's the flowers or the all flowers clusters. And there's some of the nice foliage you see. And here's another different species, also very nice, also crawling on the ground, and also having some beautiful flower clusters mixed with Rhagodia or Australian spiny saltbush. And here we go. We have the rhizome, the new shoots, some of the young foliage in a little bit lighter green, and some of the silver leaves that are going to be the old individuals, and a brand new flower cluster right here. And some of the medium-sized shrubs, such as the one we have here, or some of the small one. This one from the landscape from Naples Island, we have that woolly bush, and then we have a nice Banksia, small Banksia right here. And this one I also happened to grow several years ago, and I was able to take this photograph to show you the close-up of the blossoms and the top view of the flower clusters. And from southwestern Australia, and once again, you see Santa Cruz Botanic Garden. So here is where I was able to go plant by plant and really get a nice look at some of this. So Banksia cerulata, so this would be now a larger shrub. And here's some of the old fruit, which you can still see. They're waiting for maybe a fire to open up. So you have some of the fruit, some of the fruit, you have some of the older flower clusters, and then you have the brand new one that it is there. And there's a brand new flower cluster. Or here's another one. And here's uh, a different species with some of the immature cluster right here and the mature one. And here's an even another species with lots and lots and lots of future flowers and old flowers and new flowers. And so here's some of the old ones or some of the big ones. So be careful because they might be too big for some of the smaller landscapes that you may be dealing with or you may have around some of the urban areas. So there will be different sizes. So if you are careful, pick and choose, you can find a perfect Banksia for your landscape. And here's some of the cones for that. And some of the ones that are going to be tree-like or can grow to be the size of trees, such as this one right here. And just showing you some of the beautiful cones in this case with seeds inside and some cones without seeds, so they have open to release that. Another very large one. Here's beautiful brand new flower cluster, and as they open, that's how they're going to look. And as they die out, that's how the seeds and the fruits, not the seeds, but the fruit will look like. And just another very large one with a big flower cluster. So this is Banksia leptophylla. And here's another one right here, kind of with pine needles or leaves that look like pine needles. And you can see underneath it, you have a network of blossoms. So this would be some of the species that are going to be pollinated by some of those tiny or small marsupials. So you can see that some of the flowers are going to be held underneath the plant. So you can see on this side, you have all the leaves. You don't see the flowers out and are being exposed because the plant wants to protect that marsupial. So on this side where they have cut the plant, now you can admire and see the flowers. So they're hidden, they're below the ground. Perhaps the marsupial can needs protection from the sun because it's going to be very hot and very dry, or the marsupial may need protection from some predators, and you have that extra defense with the leaves that are going to be sharp and almost needle-like. And so the plant also has a nice network of branches where the marsupial can crawl and climb and be able to reach some of the flowers wherever the plant may be producing them. And here's the blossoms where the marsupial would be able to feed off of the ground. And they're going to be very high in or have a copious amount of nectar because marsupials will be larger animals that will require more calories to sustain themselves. And there's the blossoms for it. And just more of the larger shrubs here and a few more. Just when I was at Santa Cruz, it was very nice to see some of these plants that I've only seen them in books. And I finally got a chance to see them in person, which is a very nice thing. And I could spend day after day just going and admiring every single plant that is here. And then there's Diandra, Banksia. I think they're now Banksia. In the old days, Diandra was made into was considered a different genus. But here's one that you don't want to mess with. So here's a very sharp, almost holly-like leaves and showing you the smaller flowers. So here's a top view of the flowers and some of the side views of those. And just, here's another Banksia, just showing you some beautiful flowers, and another big one right here, just to show you some more. And Banksia meisneri, this will be more of a smaller one. So here's a tiny cluster. And then Diandra proteoides, right here with very sharp spiny leaves and very interesting flowers right there. Face view kind of facing down, most likely a marsupial. Diandra Calophila, another one that it's going to be hiding its flowers so you don't see them there, but they are produced at the ground level where the animal can feed without any problem. And kind of colorful because they make sure the animal can see them. And then also very common in the landscape, or probably the more common individual, are going to be the Gravelias. This is Gravelia robusta, or big tree that you may grow here in Southern California. So here's just the close-up of the flowers that I've shown you before. And some of the newer ones that have like good uh, good for people to consider as ground cover. So here is another Gravelia just covering the ground. So very good new additions to some of the landscape and including some of the very nice flowers that they can bring into the landscape. Many of them because in Australia they were pollinated or the natural pollinator may be a bird. In Southern California we have hummingbirds that will feed off of the nectar from these flowers. And here's Grevilleas being used in the landscape here in Southern California and some of the big ones right there. And here's a smaller one, small ground cover with the pink flowers. And that was the one that I used before to show you the characteristics of the flowers. And a very small one right here. Here's the blossom, a full-size blossom for scale. And just a couple more that are coming out every year. There might be new introductions of grevilleas because they're selecting for more colorful ones or taller ones or just different forms because they're all drought tolerant and it merits space or two in the landscape. And here's some of the blossoms as they're beginning to develop into the fruit. So there's the base where you have that ovary that begins to mature. And here's the ovary as it gets a little bit older. And eventually you have the mature ovary with the remnants of the stigma and the style and two seeds that are going to have a papery wing because the dispersal agent will be the wind. And so same thing with your Banksias, the seeds are going to have some kind of parachute that will allow for wind distribution. And then here's Gravelia nudiflora. This have recently been out available at either Armstrong or some of the local garden centers. Gravelia the Purata, here's a smaller shrub just growing and creeping over rocks and showing you some of the very nice reddish flowers. Here's another Gravelia Vestita, smaller shrub right there with white flowers, and there's the individual blossoms. And then this one is another species, or this one, and again, I can keep showing you different species. Gravelia Kiffolium with holly-like leaves, and there's the blossoms for that, and the close-up of those. And then this very colorful one, Gravelia the Purata, which I think I've shown you before. But as you go, you find one that may not be as good as the other. And so here, this one is showing you a lot of blossoms. And more from the landscape at the LA County Arboretum, where this one has been growing for years and showing you the flowers. And then a little bit more unusual is going to be isopogon, sometimes known as drumsticks, because when the flowers die, they may look or resemble the sticks of the musical instrument for playing the drums. So here are his how the flowers are going to look. And they're also very popular for flower arrangement. So I was able to purchase some of the material from the local flower mart, and I was able to root out the plants and be able to grow them here in Long Beach. So here's very long stem, and it shows you why it is referred to as a drumstick. And so here's a cluster of flowers. And there's also a pink version of it. So here's that one that was also available through the Flower Mart. Here's Isopagum baxteri, this one from UC Santa Cruz. And I wish there would be more, but there's just a few here and there. If you ever come, you may come across, and usually not as a plant, but more as a cut flower. And then we have Leukodendron. Leukodendron now puts us to Africa. It's called Silver Tree, and there's very few in Long Beach. And somewhere in California Heights, there's this individual growing in the front yard of a house Leukodendron means white tree, and in fact, all of the parts of the plant are going to be kind of silvery white because it comes from dry climate, so it needs to have that protection. And here it is when it was growing at UC Santa Cruz by itself. So this gives me a chance to see it a little bit better and show you the foliage. And this one unfortunately happens to fall, but it's okay. And here's some of the shrub leucodendron, and there's going to be many of them. Leukodendron galpini, showing you how big they can get, or in a mixture with this other leucodendrons that we have here. So lots of foliage, nice of diversity, and they also have some kind of cone-like fruit structure to protect the seeds. And leucodendrons also release the seeds or may release the seeds after a fire because South Africa is also prone to regular fires. So I grown it many years here, Leukodendron galpini, and that's where I was able to find some of the plants when they were in flower. So you can see the golden yellow flowers coming out. They have the same characteristics as any of the other members. And then that fruit or that cone-like structure that you'll see there. And so here is kind of an image from a botanic garden of South Africa with some of the hebes and different types of leucodendron that you may find out there, including some where the top leaves may have some colorful coloration to it in preparation to flower and creating a larger display that kind of resembles a flower. And there's the plant right here, and there's by itself. Here's the Leukodendron lignum, very large, and that color is all from the leaves, so not from the flower, and that could be good, especially in areas where it might be cold, hot, where flowers may fade or may be harmed by the heat. And investing a lot of energy in flowers, it's just going to be a waste of energy. So by investing a little bit of energy in having colorful leaves that are already resistant to heat, and dryness is going to be more efficient way of showing the color and attracting pollinator by many of these plants. And so here is the different view, a different plant, and you can see all the color. And there's some more colorful leaves for this plant. And there's some more just to show you how nice it can get. Leukodendron speciosifolium. So here's that individual with some of the cones and or the remnants of the cone. Leukodendron sacile, that's going to be the sunbush, kind of golden yellow, as you can see here. And from this angle, and there's the close-up of those flowers, and an even close-up right there, and an even close-up of the many tiny blossoms that are going to be produced. Another image, just different plants from South Africa, including in the center, we have that leukodendron, just showing you some of the red color. And here is an even closer, so with different aloes and restios, or Cape rushes as they're referred to, just showing you kind of an image of what Africa may look like if you ever could visit them. And then we have the genus Banksia, no, Protea, not Banksia. This is Protea. Banksia is from Australia. Protea is from Africa as well. So here's a house here around Long Beach that has some of the larger plants that I have seen. So here is some of those plants there, leucodendrons and more leucodendrons. Sorry, we didn't go to Banksia. We are still with leucodendrons, and here's the plants. And in the landscape, in a Mediterranean style garden, I guess there's some place for them, and there's the leucodendron with very tiny blossoms right there, and the beginnings of the cones, and some variegated form. This is known as the jester leucodendron because it's going to have variegated leaves And then Leucospermum. These are commonly known as pin cushions. And so here's some of them as they are growing in just very dry climate, very dry, very easy to grow. So there's the beginning of the flowers. Here's in the landscape, so showing you how nice and colorful they can be. And there's the many blossoms, kind of showing you why they get their name. So here's a house in Long Beach where it can give you a good idea how big they can get, and or some of the yellow flowers that we have here, and or some of the reddish flower. And if we go back to this photograph that I showed you in the beginning, I took it when there was no flowers. And so when I went back later on, this is what surprised me. So we have a very nice Leukodendron and Leucospermum. So we have Leukodendron in the back and Leucospermum in the front. And so when we look at the front of the house, you can see now the plants have changed a lot. Now they're very colorful. Now they're a very attractive feature. This is Spermum reflexum because the flowers, the blossoms kind of reflects, as you can see there. And so here's the beautiful, beautiful blossoms for this individual. And there's some that kind of look like sea anemones or sea animals. And from the flower mart, I was able to find a yellow form. So selections that are out there. And so beautiful landscape scenery here with Leukodendron and Leucospermum, both from South Africa. And so here's Leucospermum, some member of from the Botanic Garden. So I guess I didn't take a good picture of that label, but here's a different species that I have never seen available to the public. I wish it would, because I would love to grow this individual. So there's the tiny blossoms showing you the stigma that has been already covered with pollen. And here's a different species. So here's beautiful flowers. And so now it's Protea. Now let's go to the right one. So Protea is also from South Africa, as well as Leucospermum, as well as Leukodendron, and some of the other members that we've seen before. And then the Banksia and Soruria and the Isopogon from Australia. And so Protea are going to be also very popular. Proteas are going to be very beautiful. So here's the close-up of that flower cluster with all the different blossoms. There's a side view. So now we have some kind of bract or leaf-like structure that is going to be very colorful, kind of creating a cup or a cone. And then the blossoms are going to come out from there. So here's some of the bracts and more bracts here protecting the blossoms inside. And that's how it looks inside. And this is another one that I grew many years ago, and I was able to take a photograph. So here's how they may look when you grow them with lots of space, and showing you that at the tip of every single branch, you may have a flower. The flowers have the advantage of lasting for several days, and that's why they were a very popular plant for flower arrangements, because you would pay a little bit more, but you would have an arrangement that would last for many years, not years, sorry, many days, or even a few weeks. And so here's just a combination. You have leucodendrons with protea side by side, scenery from South Africa in a botanic garden. And here's a brand new blossom as it's starting to open and become mature. And that's the face of that. And right next to that seed, you can be accompanied by this beautiful protea. And this one, you can see the flowers right there with the bracts and the face. Protea Obtusifolia, that would be this one right here with the golden yellow or the yellow-like bracts with many tiny blossoms inside. So here's a smaller one, smaller Protea, so you can see the face of the plant. Protea nitida, showing you some of the dead flowers right there, and the big specimen here. And here's the beautiful brand new blossom as they are getting ready to open. And here's some of the old or the spent flowers or the ones that are already open. Protea Tsunami. So this is going to be this red one from South Africa as well. And around here in Long Beach in Southern California, we have another tree known as the fire wheel, so Stenocarpus. This one's be grown in the medium next to Memorial Hospital on Long Beach Boulevard. And so here is a beautiful orange red cluster of flowers that when it's in full bloom, it's going to be very difficult to miss. So here's some of the flowers in the bud stage to the left, where it's kind of greenish, and as they mature, they're going to turn orange. So here's the blossoms as they are beginning to open and be ready. And so there's the stigma as they're getting ready to come out. So here is the flower that I pulled out, and this is once it opens. So you have the stigma leading to with the style to the ovary right here. So that is where the seeds will be developed, and then you have the four tepals with the stamens at the tips or at the end. So perfect. And so there's the names for the different components of the firewheel tree. And so here's a close-up of the reproductive components. The bottom right has the female components, stigma style. The top left has your stamens with the tepals. And then we have the fruit. In this case, it's going to be a dry capsule. So the seeds will be dispersed by wind. And in this one, you can see the remnants of that stigma and the style. And in the middle, where you saw that ovary, that would what becomes that capsule here. And so here's many those fruits that have already matured. And there's the seeds with that wing for making sure that they get dispersed by the wind. And there's the seeds. And then there's a few other Stenocarpus. Here's Stenocarpus salignus from UC Santa Cruz, another small, large plant or large individual, kind of like a tree. And flowers not as showy, but it's very interesting, typical member of this family. And then another species, Mimetis. This is one that I wish I would grow, and I wish I would see more around the neighborhood, but it's not very common, and or people usually kill them, but it merits a lot more attention. And here's Lambertia, which is another genus. This one not as showy as the Proteas, but it's still a very nice plant. And if somebody's looking for something different, then they might consider something like this, a different genus from this family. And then Saruria, this would be another one that I need to try a lot harder, but it's very difficult to find plants around here in Southern California. Wish there would be more growers so they become available. So this was obviously a big blunder. If you've ever seen the movie Hulk, it shows Saruria as that rare plant from South America that was supposed to have the cure for the ailment that is causing the Hulk to turn green and all that. And so when I saw it, like that's Saruria, that's from Australia. Why is it being depicted as a South American rare and unusual plant, which is not that rare. It's just difficult to find. I don't think growers really grow it, but it's not from South America. So this Hulk movie made a terrible, terrible botanical blunder by showing you that flower, saying this from South America. And just going back to Long Beach, we have this very nice house with different Banksias, different Leukodendrons. They've been here for a while, so you can see by how high they are. And if you happen to be there in the fall, when they're blooming, it's quite a nice sight. Right now they are getting ready. And you can see some of the cones and the different views of this garden. and including some of the blossoms that you may find, or at least the remnants of them for this Protea that is growing here in Long Beach. And there's the face view, and this other Protea here with these beautiful flowers that you have there, or this Leukodendron, a very large one, and or the other Protea that you're gonna see if you happen to walk by there here in Long Beach, and the blossoms and the inside. And so here's a typical flower arrangement in a area, probably a bar or some kind of restaurant, which flower arrangements is what made this plant popular. And so with these flower arrangements, which I'm sure if you have not seen it, you can start looking for them. If you have not grown them, you can definitely give them a try because they are worth trying to grow them. So with this, we'll end. Have a great day.